So really happy to have you here, Melanie. Melanie Crane.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, welcome to the Rick Bisson podcast. This is episode number 18.
So excited.
I'm really excited to hear more about you and your experience and the lessons you've learned in life. You've got a very interesting background and a background in psychology.
Yes.
And a background in athletics.
Mm-hmm.
And those, are so dovetailed together. So really look forward to getting some tidbits from that. So Melanie Crane, go ahead, give us your story.
Awesome. Well, thank you both, Benjamin and Rick, for having me here. I'm really excited to connect with you both. So I guess I can start from back my earliest childhood memories. I was born in Pennsylvania, and both my parents at a young age decided that they were going their separate ways. So my brother and I and my mom moved to Philadelphia. She was a trauma nurse in the ER at Temple University Hospital, and it was a tough environment to live in, and she quickly realized that she didn't want to raise us in that inner city Philadelphia school system. So she took a job and a leap of faith, and we moved to Union, Maine. And that was really tough. That was really tough for my brother and I to have that adjustment and move so far away from my father.
He was still in Pennsylvania.
He was still in Pennsylvania, and he still is. He recently moved to Vermont. But and so I needed an outlet. And my mom recognized that quickly and put me into a small local gymnastics facility in Rockport, Maine called Fundamental Moves.
Oh, Fundamental Moves, sure.
Yep. And coached by Kit Bigford, who was my first gymnastics coach. And it was a lifesaver for me. I got very passionate at a very young age, and it quickly became my love, my first love.
You were 5?
I was 5 and a half, 6. Yep.
Okay, yeah.
And, started one time a week. I would go to practice and then very quickly absorbed as much as I could. And from there, it was 2 times a week, 3 times a week. And I got the itch to go to the Olympics. That was my dream. And every summer I would go back down to visit my dad, and I would train at one of the elite gymnastics facilities in Allentown, Pennsylvania, called Parkettes. And there I was surrounded by Olympians. And that was when I wanted to make it a reality, and I was willing to do whatever it took.
Your mind was expanded.
My
never
mind
to
was
return.
completely expanded. It was a different sport in Pennsylvania than it was in Maine. So I quickly outgrew the current gym I was at and the current skill set of my coach.
And those around you.
And those around me. And I was comfortable, and I don't like being comfortable. So at the age of 12,
What does it mean you were comfortable?
I wasn't challenged. I was the best there, and I did not want to be the best. So I convinced my mom to...
Which is not like most... a lot of people would be comfortable being the best.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I am wired differently, and I've been wired differently since I was little.
Yeah.
If I'm it's more uncomfortable for me when I'm comfortable because I want to stretch myself. I recently said something to a few agents that I'm coaching, and I said, if you don't wake up every day feeling uncomfortable, you're not pushing yourself hard enough. And so I convinced my mom to let me move back to Pennsylvania when I was 13 to train. So I moved down there. I left all of my friends and family, and I trained.
Moved down with your dad.
Moved down with my dad. I homeschooled every other day. I trained 6 hours a day, 6 days a week.
At 13?
At 13.
Were there many other girls that age in the same situation?
There were. A lot of gymnasts knew about Parkettes, this particular gym, because they just pushed out Olympians left and right. I think at the time there was like 12 Olympians that had come from that small gym in Allentown. And I wanted to be that. And, you have to be surrounded by those people that you want to become. So it was the hardest 2.5 years of my life for a lot of reasons, and that had nothing to do with the training. Emotionally, I wasn't ready to leave my security, and I was too young to
Your security of home with your mom
Yes.
and your brother.
Yeah. And as a gymnast, you get weighed 2 or 3 times a week. You're constantly under a microscope in every sense of the word. So I remember, I'll never forget that. And I was 13, so you don't know much about yourself. You're insecure, and leaving the guidance of my mom and the people who really supported me and knew me, I didn't have that anymore.
You were alone.
I was completely alone.
Yeah, I mean, when you went to the gym, you were advocating, participating on your own individually.
1,000%. I cried myself to sleep every single night for 2.5 years. And the only way I could get to sleep was that I would visualize myself sleeping in my bed in Maine. But I was too stubborn to move home. I wanted the dream so badly that I was willing to do whatever it took. Hindsight, I needed to be saved. I needed to be brought home.
Can I ask you a question?
Please.
The other kids that were in this program with you around the same age, similar struggles? I would assume
no one
so.
talked about it.
Of course.
And the people that I was surrounded by had families there. You know, so they had their support system surrounding them on the days that were really tough. Our coaches were, like, if you watched any kind of Netflix series, like Athlete A, that's a great docu-series about
Athlete A?
Yes.
Okay.
On Netflix about, Dr. Larry Nassar, but just the lifestyle of a elite gymnast. It is brutal. It's what you would imagine it to be. I remember my coaches, weighing us 3-4 times a week. If we didn't make weight, like, we were ridiculed, you know? And so as a 13-year-old being very impressionable, you develop a lot of dysfunction around how you think about your body, your body image, your weight. And so full disclosure, I mean, I struggled with every kind of eating disorder in the book at that age. And I realized in that moment, probably 2 years later, how depressed and unhappy I was. It was stunting my ability to be the best I could be. So I essentially saved myself and came home. And
You're now 15?
I was 15.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it. I learned a lot. I became a very good gymnast. But dealing with the baggage of that, the baggage of the sacrifice to do that, it took years to heal from it. And I did, and I have a beautiful story to share with other people, and young athletes, especially females. But when I moved home, I told my mom, I said, if I do move back, I need to go to the best gym in the state, no matter where that is.
Because you hadn't given up gymnastics or your dream.
I had not given up gymnastics at all. I still wanted to go to the Olympics. At that time, when I was 15, it became more of a reality that the Olympics was not in my future, but a college scholarship was. So I had to adjust that dream a little bit to a reality. And I told my mom, let's find the best gym in the state that's going to be able to support me. And so it happened to be in Westbrook called Maine Academy of Gymnastics.
2 hours away?
2 hours away. Again, 5 days a week.
5 days a week?
Yep.
Who's busing you back and forth?
So before I got my license, my mom drove me every single day. I left school at noon. I got to the gym at 2. I trained from 2 to 7:30. Got home at 9:30, did my homework, went to bed.
Are you going to school? I mean, you're homeschooled now.
I'm going to high school every other day. So I did what's called independent study.
Okay.
And so, and then rinse and repeat. And it was just, I knew nothing but structure.
Yeah, sure.
And it was militant, basically, growing up.
Yeah.
My mom was pregnant at the time. She got remarried and had 2 more children. And so she was pregnant, driving me back and forth from Union to Westbrook.
A mother's love.
Yes. Yep. And I will always be so grateful for her commitment and willingness to help me pursue my dream. So the day I got my license, she kicked me out the door and said, good luck.
Drive.
And so I did that. And, it's interesting because I became best gymnast I could have ever been because I was happy.
So you had found happiness.
I had found happiness.
What you were pursuing really
Yes.
ultimately was
Yes.
happiness around this.
And the peace and the love and the support of my family that I was missing, which supported me to excel.
Were you still experiencing the weight, the weigh-ins, every 2 or 3 days?
Yeah.
And, that doesn't change.
So, it's really funny you bring that up. So my first practice at Maine Academy of Gymnastics, I was still very much, I would say, manipulated by the experience I had had. Food was not a friend at that time. And I remember standing in the locker room with some of the girls in Maine, and our coaches were outside of the locker room waiting for us to show up on the floor and present ourselves, basically.
This is your first day?
My first practice,
yes.
yep. And one of the girls walked out with a Twizzler in her hand. And I stopped her. And I said, Michelle, what are you doing? I said, the coaches are right outside. She's like, yeah, so what? I'm like, you're eating a Twizzler. And they all looked at me like I was crazy. I mean, this was over 20 years ago. I still remember it like it was yesterday.
Wow.
Because I was like, they're going to get mad at you.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized, wow, this is a different environment.
Yeah.
And it was just so
More peace, more happiness, more
which allowed
comfort.
me to thrive.
Yeah.
Which allowed me to really hit my peak potential there. So
Great. Okay. So, we're Westbrook. We're happy.
Yep.
Keep going.
So, it took me, I would say, 2 years to adjust to being home again. I would wake up at 3:30 every single morning with anxiety. And it was coping from being away and coping from that whole experience. And again, I don't regret it. I learned a lot about myself, became very resilient, very independent through that experience. I grew up faster than I needed to, but it's propelled me in so many areas of my life. So for that, I'm grateful. I reached the pinnacle, I guess, of my career. I became a level 10 gymnast here in Maine. And
what does level 10 mean for those
level
of us
10
that
is
are not gymnasts?
Yeah, so gymnastics starts level 1 through level 10, and you become an elite after that. So that's, you travel internationally, go to the Olympics, things like that. So at the time, they hadn't had level 10 gymnasts in the state of Maine. So I had to compete states in other states because I had no one to compete against.
Really?
Yeah. And to this day, my coaches are family to me. I spent more time with them than I did my own family just because of the demands of my training. And yeah, so.
So level 10 gymnast.
Yes.
And then
I, went on recruiting trips. I started actively getting recruited when I was a junior in high school. And so I remember I had broken my ankle my junior year in a competition. And so
in the beginning, middle, end of season?
In the beginning.
Beginning, okay.
So obviously I was panicked because that's prime
time
picking for gymnasts. I mean, our the longevity of our career is very short.
Yeah.
Like we're done at 23.
And the show begins when you're a junior.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you need
some exposure before that, but really you got to perform.
Exactly.
That year.
Yep. So it's funny, some of my recruiting videos, if you watch them, you'll see me on bars and I have a cast on one leg and an ankle weight on the other.
To balance you out.
To balance me out. Because I wasn't willing to not send my videos in and I still needed to do my routine. So I just figured out a way to make it even because you're flailing through the air.
Yeah. I'm seeing a pattern here. You're not a victim.
No.
You're a victor.
Victor.
Yeah.
Yes. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset, you know? And so I went to...
So you were able to compete with a broken ankle, basically.
Yep, I competed. The only adjustment I had to make is that I couldn't do my dismount because I was landing hard. So I just kind of slowed down in the last movement of my routine and basically just dropped and, finished. Yeah. But I did what I could do. So I got recruited to a few schools and I landed on the University of Rhode Island for a few reasons. Hindsight, I would have picked a different school. But they were offering me scholarship and
it was fairly close, maybe.
It was close. Yeah, I didn't want to leave again. I wasn't there yet to leave or be far away. And unfortunately, that was the beginning of the end of my career. In all honesty, I should have taken some more time to heal from going to Pennsylvania. But there wasn't time, and there was so much pressure, and there was such a short window of opportunity.
Where was the pressure coming from?
Myself.
Okay.
1,000%. Debilitating pressure. And I wish, I wish I knew then what I know now about mindset.
Don't we?
Sports psychology, anxiety medication, all of it. Whatever. And I didn't. And I just white knuckled it and kept pushing and pushing. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And at the same time, we have to have awareness enough to know when to stop and heal and reset.
Ask for help.
Ask for help. And I didn't. And I didn't recognize that. And that's okay too.
Do you think people around you recognized?
No one talked about it. It was very obvious. I mean, I gained weight. I mean, that's something that I don't talk about. I gained weight in college because I was coping.
So you went to University of Rhode Island. Did you compete through college?
Yep. I competed my first 2 years, and then because of, I think, just my unhealed, wounds, and if you will, I had to stop, and that was really, really hard. But I had to. It was like the first time in my life that I made that decision for my own self-care. So I walked away, and I think now, being 34, I've been able to channel that unfinished business, and that's what I have used in my career. It's almost like that unfinished commitment that I had and that dream and desire with gymnastics that didn't really come to full fruition. And again, grateful.
Yes.
Because I've been able to identify where I can really put that passion and heart into in a different avenue.
Yeah. And, coming back to, it seems like you've really been your own advocate through all of this. And as a young person, that's not easy to do, not customary. And I'm sure that's also helped you throughout your life and these experiences.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have, I think the last 5 years of my life, I say that I have really, things just started to align with who I am, accepting my past, accepting the things that I didn't quite achieve, quote unquote. I, wasn't able to even watch gymnastics on television until a few years ago.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. It was trauma. It was PTSD all the way. I mean, I actually received EMDR, which is a form of trauma treatment.
Yeah. I know a little bit about that.
Yeah.
I'd love you to talk more about that.
I would love to. So I became an EMDR therapist.
Okay, great. So let's go. Tell me about that.
Okay.
So you became a therapist.
Yes.
You studied psychology at the University of Rhode Island.
So I got my psychology degree, and then I went on and got my master's degree in social work and cognitive behavioral therapy for the purpose of working with athletes around loss of identity. My whole admissions essay to grad school was all about losing your identity and how to cope with that. It started with my interest in veterans coming back from the war and how your whole life is turned upside down and grieving through that loss. You were once something for so long, that's all you knew. And then you were thrown into a world, a very different world, where you had to figure out who you were, what you were good at.
And aren't those highlighted in the athletes that become elite athletes, especially? Although you think about it, I think of the kids that I went to high school with who were standout athletes. They never left that. They're in their 60s or 70s, and they're still on the ball field. Glory days.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's part of your DNA. When I go into the gym, gymnastics and I smell the mats and the chalk, it's like this peace just envelopes me.
It was kind of home for you.
Completely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's the most peaceful place on earth for me. All my stress washes away when I step back on the mat. So I got, after college, I became an LCSW, which is a licensed clinical social worker. And I worked in a whole bunch of different settings. I did a lot of family therapy. I did trauma work with children. I worked with kids with autism. I worked in drug and alcohol rehab centers.
Did you?
I worked at Maine Med in the acute psych emergency department.
Did you really? Wow. That's pretty intense. So how did you find yourself in these places? Were you a solo practitioner?
Yep.
And you would, tell me how that works.
Great question. So after you graduate with your degree, you have to work under supervision for 2 years to become a licensed clinical social worker. So you could do basically everything that a psychiatrist or psychologist can do, except for prescribe medication. So I just kind of followed my interests. I wanted to learn about human behavior, and what better place to do that in different settings. So I love children, so I have a huge passion for that, which brought me to a nonprofit agency for a few years. From there, it opened up more doors of experience, and so I have always had a fascination with just psychiatry and psychosis, really, just the human mind and the whole gamut of how that shows up in people's life. And so from there, it allowed me to kind of realize what I did want to do and what I did not want to do. And I love the hospital setting, probably because both my parents work in the hospital. So I worked at Maine Med, and then eventually followed my path to working with, I was the public school therapist in Westbrook at their school district.
Oh, yeah.
And then started my own private practice from there. So, that takes some time. You have to have a few years of supervision under your belt. And created a business called Mastermind Counseling, which is where I really got to start working with elite performers, elite athletes, business owners on peak performance anxiety. Being somebody that experienced that my whole life and never knowing what the support was out there, I wanted to provide that. So I spent a few years doing that.
And how would people find you?
So I had a Psychology Today profile. So where, if you could go on there, you could find my profile there. I was also accepting insurance. So I was on insurance panels. So if you were to go on and look for a doctor or a psychologist or therapist, you could find my name there. And then my specialty was working, I worked with people of all ages, but I really started getting specialized in youth and adolescents and anxiety and depression, that area. So I worked with a lot of kids.
Interesting. Yeah. And taking from what you'd learned, obviously.
Yeah. So from there, I got certified in EMDR. So it stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing.
Say that one more time.
Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. So when we think of trauma, trauma is stored in the cells of our body. That's why when people experience a trauma, they can't remember, because your brain shuts down for survival. So in EMDR, when your eyes move back and forth, it actually stimulates memory.
Really?
Yes. It can be very intense for people who have suppressed those memories. It was actually originated, so I'm going to, as an aside, Dr. Francine Shapiro is the one who the founder of EMDR. And it came about because, in this very interesting story, she was sitting on a park bench. She was thinking about the trauma, and I want to say a dear friend of hers passed away in a car accident. And so she was reliving that memory and getting very emotional. And as she was thinking of that memory, she was watching the pigeons fly back and forth across the sky. And she was noticing that as her eyes were kind of going back and forth, the intensity of that emotion started to dissipate. And she's a neuroscientist.
Oh, sure.
So that just spiraled her research into why. So it's hard to conceptualize by thinking about it, but to experience it is a whole nother
So
story.
how do I say this?
I had my own EMDR.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
And it was specifically to heal from some of the, I don't even want to call it trauma around gymnastics because it was such an amazing positive experience, but some of the residual unhelpful patterns that I developed, that's where I sought out some of that more trauma therapy.
So you were just searching. How do I fix myself?
Yep.
Is that right?
1,000%.
Google?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Started there.
Yep. How long ago?
Oh goodness. 22.
When you were 22?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
By the way, I'm old enough that there was no Google when I was 22.
I'm
so
sure. Yeah, well, exactly. So there's so much more accessibility to some of the help out there now, you know? And so I was just very self-taught about that. And I knew that talk therapy was not getting to the root of it. I could talk about it all day long and it wasn't even scratching the surface of what I was experiencing internally. And I had enough awareness to know that. So I went on this deep search of a way to heal that and reading books. There's an incredible book called Getting Past Your Past. And it's all about trauma. It's about healing your own trauma. But it ties into EMDR. And so that's where I was first experienced
exposed to it. Yeah.
Exposed to it.
Yeah. And so did you find, you're in Maine, right?
Yep.
And you found someone around here?
Yep,
Okay.
I did. And I still talk to her to this day. She's amazing. She's just incredible. And the timing of finding her was awesome.
Yeah. And how many sessions? Is this a long process?
It really depends on the extent of the trauma. I mean, if it's so for instance, if God forbid you were in a car accident and you had to get through that trauma, that memory, it might only take one session.
Okay. A question about that. So someone has had this trauma and it's severe. They're fairly normal. Mm-hmm. Do they seek this or are they okay?
If they don't have the EMDR?
Yeah, if they don't have the EMDR or, if they seem to, I think about this for many reasons. One is I think about the World War II veterans that came back and, what separated them from the Vietnam veterans, World War I, we don't hear about it. Is it media that creates more of the story or was there more suppression? I often wonder how that all plays out.
That's a great question. I think that knowledge is power. I think that we weren't exposed to this kind of research, I guess, back in the day, obviously. And so people coped in different ways. I mean, that's why the depression, the suicide rate, the alcohol use, the substance use, really affected a lot of these people that had suppressed trauma, so that people coped with it very differently. It could come up in insomnia, you name it. That's, it's whatever avenue people can kind of cope with their own struggles. I just think the awareness now is so much greater. So we do talk about it and people can identify, oh, I am experiencing this, and I think if we're talking about trauma, it shows up differently for everybody. A kindergartner who got their crayons stolen, that's traumatic for somebody. And they could carry that with them their whole life and not even realize why they cope in an area of their life in some way. And it could be very much rooted to an experience that they don't even remember as a child. So that's the beautiful thing about EMDR is that it uncovers repressed memory.
So is it going for a specific, okay, so explain it to me more. So you go into a room, you lay down, what happens?
Yep. So my experience and the way that I, when I did EMDR as a therapist with my clients, you have headphones and there's a series of questions that we kind of prime the brain for. And then you close your eyes and basically the beeping starts. So it's beeping, bilateral beeping noises. And you're allowing your eyes to kind of go back and forth and follow the beeping. And you have to let whatever come up without judgment. And then every now and again, a couple minutes, we stop the beeping, check in, Rick, what was your experience? What came up for you? And through that, it might not make any sense. The first aha or the first memory could be red balloons. Who knows? Just something very arbitrary. But eventually what's happening on the neuroscience area is that you're working through the neural networks of your brain and peeling back memory through that question and answer. And the point is to desensitize the emotions around the memory. It's not to erase the memory. It's just that when you think of the memory, it doesn't evoke those really intense emotions anymore.
Interesting. Could somebody be experiencing the effects of that trauma and not remember the event that caused it?
1,000%.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's where the work comes in.
Yeah.
You have to be committed to self-discovery. You have to be almost obsessed with it. You have to,
and the work comes from the patient, you mean?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the therapist can, bring 49%, but the patient, the client needs to bring 51 at least, in doing that work. Because what I found when I was doing my own EMDR, if I were to go on a run or do any kind of bilateral movement, it would stimulate memory.
Yeah.
So after a session, your brain is primed for remembering several days after, and it could affect your sleep and things like that, but it's just part of the unpacking process. And it takes time. There's no time frame.
Yeah. Yeah. So this memory, let's say it's deep, comes out, and it's discovered, and then there's also, depending on the patient, time to deal with that. I assume some people may take a while to process, and they may never fully recover from it. But
very much
in the end, though, the long range outlook would be for them to find some better peace.
Yes, and find a different, going back to the memory, realizing that you're not there anymore. That's the big thing with trauma, is that when trauma happens, our brain freezes that picture. So when we think of it or we have a memory, we actually think that we're still there. We're still experiencing that thing. So with this process, it's identifying, yes, this happened to me, but I'm not there anymore. I'm safe. I'm out of that experience, so that you can objectively look at that, and that's where the healing starts, where you create space between you and that memory, or you and that experience.
So you gain from this process yourself personally from your trauma.
Very much.
Then you're able to bring this to patients, and you see their growth, let's say. They're opening up, discovering. That must be extremely rewarding.
It is. And I think ever since I was a little girl, one of my purposes in life, I believe, is to, God's not going to give you anything you can't handle, right? One of my purposes in life has been to experience some really tough stuff, so that I can guide and teach and be a mentor for those who are going through it as well. I don't think that we can fully understand unless we've been through things.
Right.
So it's allowed me to be a more impactful therapist and coach and leader, just pulling from those personal experiences.
Because you did some coaching.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In gymnastics.
I did.
Yeah. How was that?
Oh my gosh. If I could coach for the rest of my life and that's all I did, I would be happy. I love it.
Are you still coaching now some?
I had to take a little bit of a breather, just balancing, a new role and so many other things.
Which we'll get to, yes.
Yeah. And but it's always in the back of my mind. The moment that I might have a free hour of time, I'll see if I can pick up a class and coach. I just love it. It makes me the happiest.
Great. Yes. So lots of time in that sort of helping others in their psychological challenges of one sort or another, and then pretty big career change.
Yes.
So tell us about why.
Yeah.
If you
can. It's an interesting answer. It doesn't make sense on paper. 4.5 years ago, I, thought I had reached the peak. I had my private practice. It was so cute. The office, everything that I had envisioned I wanted for my life.
And this is entrepreneurial on your part.
Yes.
By the way,
100%.
you built this business all by yourself.
Yep.
Went to school, got your degree, did your training. Now you're in business on your own.
Yes. Yep. And so, I don't want to say a character flaw, but
this is in your late 20s.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. So after I got through grad school, I, worked in the field and then was able to establish a private practice and a business doing all the things I loved.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't enough. And I had to reconcile with myself. Is this a healthy aspect of me feeling like it's never enough? Or am I really at a crossroads and am I being called to do something different? And so I had to sit with that for about a year. I've always had a tendency to do the next thing, keep going, keep striving, keep reaching. And there's a
level 1 to level 10.
1,000%.
In whatever it is.
In whatever it is.
Yeah.
If I was a Starbucks employee, I'd be the best darn coffee maker you'd ever see.
Yeah.
So I had to recognize, is this a healthy characteristic, or is this, or is this something that I'm just going to continue to do my whole life and never feel fully fulfilled?
Right.
So I sat with it for about a year, prayed, meditated, journaled, and in a very weird roundabout awareness, real estate popped into my head.
And how did that pop into your head?
It's interesting.
Somebody or?
Well, I had never bought and sold anything in my life. I knew nothing. I didn't even know what Keller Williams was. I knew nothing about real estate, nothing about anything other than therapy and what I was doing. A good friend of mine worked at KW as a admin, and she said, "Mel, I know you. I know who you are. Just have a conversation. Just talk to somebody over here." That's what I did. And after getting exposed to the magnitude of KW and the opportunity, I was like, done.
Yeah, level 1 to level 10 at KW has many subsets.
Yes. And I felt that excitement. And I sat with that for a while. So long story short, I got my real estate license. The day I passed, I closed my doors in my private practice and jumped 2 feet in. I actually started at a commercial company because I wanted to experience that, I had this vision in my head. I was going to trailblaze through commercial. Yeah. And I'm grateful I did.
Yes.
I learned a lot.
Yes.
And also realized this was not the environment that I could thrive in long term. And in that process, I met my team lead, Janice, and instantly knew I needed her in my world for a lot of reasons. And so, when I met with her, she asked me what my goals were. And I asked her, what's the average sale for a new agent? She said, 5 or 6 houses their first year. I said, I want to do 25. What do I got to do to do that?
Because I'm going from level 1 to level 6 my first year.
And I liked the idea of making 6 figures. I mean, I could not fathom what that would even be or feel like. I said, what do I have to do to make 6 figures?
Yeah.
So we just sat there and reverse engineered how many people I needed to call every week, every day. And I just did it. Just like I did with gymnastics. It wasn't, everyone's like, wow, how did you do that? I'm like, it was simple. It wasn't easy. You just follow the equation, you show up, you execute, you do what's uncomfortable every single day. And if you don't, that's on you.
Yeah. Then you're uncomfortable. You just continue to be in a circle of uncomfortable.
Exactly.
Yes.
I was more uncomfortable by not doing what made me uncomfortable. And I think that was the switch in the brain.
Yeah.
And so, I talk about a learning curve. We joke about it on my team. I did not know what a furnace was. Like, I knew nothing about houses.
Yet your experience with people.
Yes.
And being able to understand what they wanted.
Exactly.
Would be priceless.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was the mindset.
Yes.
I knew in my heart I was the best person to be working with that client. Even though I didn't know how to read a deed.
Right.
I was the best person because I cared. I cared a lot.
Yeah.
And I just used that energy to propel me. In my first 10 months, I made over 6 figures and hit my goal and, didn't look back.
Well, we recognize Benjamin, I think, was the first one that met you. And I remember him coming back. He showed one of our properties to one of you and your buyers, who ultimately ended up buying the house.
Yep.
And he said, I just met Melanie. and she's going places. I mean, it was easy for him to say, and we all recognize that.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's why we've always continued our relationship, because when you know, and when you meet people that are cut from a similar cloth, you gravitate towards.
Yes. So you quickly proved yourself in a couple-ish years that you can perform in this at a high level. And then your newest position, tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's funny. The first time I knew I wanted to be coached by Brad, and I knew that I had
Brad Knowles, who is our
team leader.
Team leader, which for those that are not in the Keller Williams world would be the general manager of our, and he's a general manager of our market center, which there are how many agents?
525.
525 agents that Brad is responsible for, and helping us, continue to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I knew that in order to meet with him and get on his schedule, I had to be in the top 10%. The day that I found out I was in the top 10%, I called Brad and I said, "When can I meet with you?" And the next Tuesday, I was sitting in his office. And from that point on, I met with him every single week. And he asked me where I wanted to be in 3 years. And I said, sitting in your chair. Because, I've always had the pull for leadership.
Sure.
And I knew that I had to do sales and understand it at a high level to be able to coach it and speak to it and walk that walk. And at the same time, I have always known I wanted to be in the vein of leadership in my growth. So, fast forward a couple years, the second year I almost doubled my sales for the first year. And, the financial security and abundance of that was life-changing for my family.
Freeing
completely. And I had never experienced that. I mean, I grew up single mom. She worked so hard. And there were many nights where cereal was dinner.
You saw and you lived the struggle.
Very much.
Yes.
Like Christmases.
You could see it on your mom's face.
Yeah.
You could feel it in your own being. Yeah.
And that security piece was something that I was really striving for. And then to be able to give that to my family was priceless. So, it exposed me to what's out there and the possibilities of life.
Yeah. Again, the mind expanded.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Level.
Yep. And so, I thought about leadership for 3.5, 4 years in conversation strongly with our leaders to talk about that and reconcile with what I was walking away from to step into leadership. And that took a while to kind of come to grips with.
Yes.
But it's anything in life. You take, sometimes you have to take a step back to go 5 feet forward. And that's my sacrifice currently. But I stepped into the assistant team leader role just, 2 months ago.
It's only been 2 months?
It's only been 2 months.
Wow. It seems like it's been like a year or longer. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So really hit the ground running and I could not be happier. I get to spend my day literally supporting
your
the
coaching.
Agents and my coaching and growing the company. And
I mean, even in you coaching in a couple of different ways, but you're there to support, I guess.
And I think I've really, it's been affirming for me to really understand how happy that makes me. And I get to wake up every day and just be a sounding board and a support and an inspirer and a motivator. I haven't been happier.
Yeah. Great. Awesome.
So, yeah.
and tell us also your coaching.
Yep.
Tell us a little bit about that.
So about a year ago, I created a training called the 7 Pillars of Self-Discipline. And I pulled from all of my life experiences, my professional experiences, my education. And I'm really excited about it. I'm not sure where it's going to go, but I would like to write a book. That's kind of my goal this year, is to start chipping away at how to even begin that process. But I want to turn it into a book.
Yes.
The 7 pillars, the acronym is mapping. So it stands for all the 7 pillars. So mapping the M is mental and emotional regulation skills. and this all ties into self-discipline, and we can talk more about it. So the M is mental and emotional regulation skills. Number 1, like we can't force ourselves to do something if we're not fully committed to it. A is addressing ambivalence. So part of us wants to change. The other part of us is afraid of sacrifice. So reconciling that internal ambivalence that we all experience in pursuit of anything. P, prioritization. The other P, procrastination management.
Ooh.
I, identity-based goals. So this isn't just SMART goals.
Okay.
This is, I call them heart goals. Goals that require you to change as a person, like require you to become the person that it takes to reach your goals. And there's layers to that. And it starts with our core values and then builds off from that.
What I stands for what again?
Identity-based
Okay.
goals.
Great.
Yep. The N is new habits. So developing new habits around self-discipline. And then the G is grit. So tying all of those pillars together with passion and perseverance. So it took me a year and a half. I mean, I'm still working on it. Every single time I teach it, I want to change it because I learned something new and I get great feedback. And I was joking with my husband, like, this could be amazing or just crazy. I don't know, but I'm just going with it.
Yes.
So I kind of went out on a limb last year and flew out to California and taught it at a market center in Orange County, California, Laguna Beach.
Yep. Yes.
And there was like 55 people. I was on top of the world.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
It was the best 3 hours of my life.
Yeah. They were engaged.
Oh, my gosh.
They were learning.
Oh, my gosh.
You left something behind that they will carry forward with.
It was amazing. And the best part is my husband came and he sat in the class. And he was engaged and he was raising his hand and asking questions. And it was
He saw you in your element.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And he actually at one point stood up and he said to everyone, and I'm like, oh gosh, what is he going to say? And he looked at he addressed the whole audience and he said, my wife, he's like, I've watched her create this training the last 2 years. He's like, she doesn't just teach this, but she lives this every single day. And all the females up front were like, oh. It was just a really amazing moment.
Affirming.
And just, it just sealed that thought of like being a teacher and creating content and
And these 7 pillars and this mapping acronym for goal setting. Well, no, it's not. These are the 7 pillars. So that's them. Okay.
7 pillars that encompasses what I believe to be a self-disciplined person or living a self-disciplined life.
So, and you've taken those from your experience throughout all of this that you've described, and you've watched other people who have been either at a high level or trying to get to a high level, or, you know, in you also have worked with people who have been maybe at the lowest of their lows of life. Yeah. And that all has played into this. And
I learned the most from those moments. I've learned the most about myself when I was in the lowest, and when you have to fight to get better and fight to persevere, you know, when life is the hardest, you know, right? That's when we learn the most.
I don't want to draw you off track too much here, but I think about that, and, you know, we help people that ask for help or that are trying to self-improve themselves. They come to you, they say, you know, I'm working on this. I need to grow this part of myself. And then in a whole different part are these folks that they're homeless, they're addicted, they're struggling, they're not getting help, they're not going to get help. You're there to help them. Yeah. How does that work?
That's, well, the first thing that comes to mind in that question is also recognizing how much energy you spend on the ones who don't want to get better.
How do you recognize that?
That is so hard. That is hard. That I would say with my own experience in those situations, it's showing up for them 100% consistently, building that trust, And if they don't meet you halfway, or if they give up, you can see that. You can see it in the way they talk. You can see it in the way they show up for themselves. Hope is a really powerful emotion.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of actually research around hope and the science of hope. And when we don't have hope, our longevity of life is shortened.
Sure.
I mean, there is like staggering research around that. So
if you're not hoping, you're not growing.
exactly.
Yeah.
When you don't have faith, when you don't, you know, yes, we might be knocked down 7 times and feel like we've lost everything. But there is a whisper within us if we quiet ourselves enough to hear it. And if we can hold on to that, just that, we can get by the next moment and take it minute by minute. But the ones I think that are hopeless sometimes don't recover, you know, don't pull themselves out. And of course, there's other factors that keep people in situations, you know. But that's a tough one.
I bet that would be very tough. Yeah, very tough.
Yeah.
So I'd love to, we're going to learn more about this course, maybe not today, but some other time. You've also are working on further coaching development. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I work as an instructor and a coach for Knowles Development, so Brad Knowles. And so I have a couple agents that I coach from different states around their real estate business. My coaching approach is different than I think the standard traditional coaching approach. I really don't believe that you can fit anyone into a box. Sure. So my approach with every person I work with is very different. You know, you meet them where they're at. Yeah. You figure out what they're motivated by, how they're motivated. It often feels like more of a therapy session than not. And that's just where I feel most comfortable. That's kind of where the conversations always go. But if I pull from my own experience, that's really where the change happens anyway. You know, we could talk about the business and the numbers and the lead gen all day long, but if we're not going to like addressing the fire, not the smoke, we're not moving the dial, maybe temporarily, and then we fall back into old patterns and behaviors. So
we do love to live in the smoke.
Yes, we do. It's comfortable there.
Yes, it's comfortable there. Yeah. Maybe a little uncomfort, but
not enough to move the dial.
Enough, right.
Yeah. So that's kind of my coaching approach is that way. It's probably has more of a therapy type feel, and it may or may not work for everybody. Sure. So I try to stay true to that because that's where I feel like I'm at my best and making the most impact.
Yes. And you're also working on another level of training.
For
Master, aren't you?
Yes.
And tell us about that.
Yeah. So I took I would love to be an instructor for Keller Williams. That opens up a whole world of opportunity to teach at a bigger platform. And it takes some time to get there. You have to go through a series of trainings and courses and evaluations.
Are there different levels within Keller Williams training, I guess? Because is master faculty, is that
a
so
that's
level?
Like the peak, I guess. And I'm still learning kind of all of the levels. Yeah. So you take level 1 is taking and passing the train the trainer course. So that's level 1. And then once
you have to you're traveling for that. You're not just doing that this is not just the Portland office that's training you. Right. You are traveling. And tell us a little bit more about
that. So usually they're hosted in Austin. So I just got back from Austin in October. I took the advanced train the trainer course. The first course is train the presenter. And then the next level is train the trainer advanced. So, and it's a very different experience. They give you your content a month before or a few weeks before, and you have to show up and be ready to present in front of an audience. And they're all judging you and
they're
evaluating.
Not an audience of people who have never heard what you're going to present. They're an audience of judges, we'll say.
Yes, and they're actually, so there's a couple instructors, and then the room is also full of the other people who are taking the course, and everyone's evaluating you. So everyone has their own evaluation paper. So it's pretty nerve-wracking. I actually went first because I know myself well enough. I said, my hand went right up in the air when they said who's willing to go first. Just wanted to get out of the way. Yes. And I did not pass the first time, which is okay. They said
The success rate or the pass rate is less than...
It's like less than 15%. They said like 1 or 2 people out of the entire course that trip was going to pass. And the ones that were there had taken it 2 or 3 times.
Right.
I was like rookie. So I was just there for the experience and to get out of my comfort zone. So unfortunately I didn't pass, but I felt very, very good about how it went. And so, once you pass that, there's like 75 hours and evaluations that you have to submit. It's a pretty grueling process, but you learn so much about the art of presenting.
The art of presenting.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, we will go to these Keller Williams events where there are, master faculty that are presenting, and there's a reason why they present at the level that they do. They haven't just stepped out of a successful real estate career and started to present. They've learned the process. I think Gary Keller.
Yeah.
Right. I know that he recognized that as a very important piece of helping us all be our best selves.
And it's interesting. The ones who do it the best are the ones who look like they're not doing anything at all.
Yes.
There is it's like an orchestration up there. It's like a Broadway show. I mean, every move you make, every positioning of your body and your hands and your projection and where you pause. I mean, it is all evaluated. So it's a really interesting process.
Yeah. And putting a psychologist into that arena must just add a lot. And it brings a lot. You bring a lot to that as well.
Well, the feedback I got, some good feedback, and then the constructive feedback was, and this was interesting and something that I'm not surprised about, but I think I had a hard time being really vulnerable. And really, when I talked about, I gave an experience about my gymnastics background, and it was when I was at nationals my junior year. I just analyzed, paralyzed. Like, it was the worst competition I've ever had, and it was the highest pressure competition.
This was at
when I was a junior in high school.
Junior in high school.
Yep. And I couldn't go to school for like a week after because I was just so depressed by my performance. So I talked about that briefly in my presentation to give an example about, I was doing the 80-20 principle and talking about, priorities, but talked about my background, and I wasn't vulnerable enough. I was speaking almost like I was telling someone else's story and not really being in the moment with that experience. And
you needed to get them there with you. They needed to be there on that beam with you.
Yes. Yes. And so and it was a good learning, to recognize, okay, maybe I still have some work around that experience to not be, that it didn't allow me to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Well, we only have 24 hours in a day, and none of us have any benefit of more than that. I wish we did, because I'd love to talk more.
Come back anytime.
I think we'll probably do that for sure. Yeah, it's been a great conversation, Melanie. And, I've learned so much from getting to know you, and just in this past hour, learned so much, but about myself as well. And just the process that you've been through and gotten to where you are. It's fascinating, and encourage you to keep going to support others. You have a heart for that, and it's a gift that you've been given. Keep doing it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate you.
Well, I thank you very much for being on, and until the next time, thanks very much for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.